Hello, everybody. Welcome to Cache Valley Counseling's Max group. Um, I was going to wait a few more seconds to start just to make sure I'm not missing anybody, but looks like we have a couple participants, so that's great. Otherwise, if you're watching this on your own time, thanks for doing so. I'll just reiterate the purpose of the group. This is not therapy, so um, just keep that in mind. This is a group for people coping with a variety of situations and presenting problems. Information discussed and shared in this group is intended to support the therapeutic process and increase readiness for change. If you're feeling suicidal or having life-threatening thoughts, this group's not a place to discuss that. Please consider calling 988 or getting in touch with your therapist as soon as possible, or reaching out to a loved one help you with any additional resources. We're recording this and it will be available to watch on our YouTube channel. Due to this, if you're not comfortable turning your camera on, that's fine. If you like to change your name on Zoom or anything like that, feel free to do that. And feel free to reach out and participate in this. You can do that through the microphone or through chat, and I'll do my best to reply to those. Anyway, so I'm Caisie Neely. Let me turn up my light a little bit so you can see, and I'm going to try not to wear those because they glare. So tonight, I'm going to talk about a concept called differentiation of self. And this was an idea kind of developed by Murray Bowen. He was one of the early family systems theorists and therapists. So his theory and model is called the Bowen family systems. So if you hear something tonight that sits with you or like interests you, that's where you can delve more into things. Differentiation is a huge concept. And you can take it in a lot of different angles and apply it in different ways. So I'm going to try to keep it more basic. So there might be things that I do miss or maybe don't cover fully. So just keep that in mind. There's more to learn, and there's different therapists and stuff that use differentiation in their own way. But it's a concept that applies to all of us. And it's something that all of us will work on our entire lives. It's not something that really can be mastered completely, but it's something that you can gauge. And it fluctuates, like your level of differentiation. And I'm going to pull up some slides so you can kind of see more concretely what I'm talking about. But your level of differentiation will fluctuate through different times in life, and that's normal. But basically what it is the ability to separate your thoughts from your feelings, and also be able to separate yourself along with those thoughts and feelings from others in your life. That could be in your family, social groups, community, friends. And it sounds simple, and it is a simple idea, but it doesn't make it easy. So I hope that those participants were able to get in here. Sorry, I just noticed that. Let's see. Okay. So I'm going to share a screen with you that has some slides on it so we can see a little more clearly. Where did that go? Hold on. Sorry. Okay. Let me share this so you guys can see it. Yeah, we talked about that. So this, okay, so to kind of give you an overview of what I'm talking about, it's important to explain this concept, this real experience of, you know, our the experience of being human. And something that we struggle with continually is the need for connection, but also the need for our own autonomy. And it's kind of this tension that we will balance and struggle with our whole lives. Um, and then with that, something that can happen is when we're on either end of this too far, that might indicate that we're enmeshed with someone else or with our family or a group, or we might be um, emotionally cut off from others, which would this is what that represents over here. So really what we want is the goal would be to be in this center. This would be the the spot where we have the most flexibility in this kind of sweet spot. This feeling of being able to stay connected to others and show up authentically, but also know our own self and know when we're, what our boundaries are and who we are. So differentiation, really, if we could do that perfectly, we would be right in the middle right here. But as I said before, you're going to fluctuate different times of your life. So if you think of like a newborn baby, and even up until a, you know, tweenhood, the babies and little toddlers, they are they're wholly dependent on their caregiver. So um, they're going to be over here, and that's normal because that's for their survival. Um, and even you've heard sometimes babies they don't actually know they're separate from their parent for a certain amount of time. That's just one idea. I don't know if everybody believes that, but that is one school of thought, is that babies for a certain time, when they just think mom or dad is like another extension of themselves, and then that slowly becomes more separated and we become more different and differentiated from our parent or caregiver as we grow. And then you think of teenhood, when a teen, they struggle with that need to be themselves, but also dependent on parents and still, living in that space and um, following the rules, but also wanting to explore, who am I without my parents influencing everything. That's when we see friends really gravitating toward their social groups, which is also normal. So um, that's kind of on a basic level, like a more simple level of this concept of differentiation. So so how this happens is that families and groups will affect how an individual thinks and feels and acts, according to those thoughts and feelings. But also an individual impacts their family system, and then the family will be impacted by the individual. So it's a circle, it's a system. And that's really a lot of what we talk about here at Cash Counseling, is our system, not just ourself. So it's not a linear thing, it's a circular thing. So we're continually affecting those that we're in relationship with, and they're also affecting us. And um, this idea of differentiation is that the less development that the self has, or of self, so as I'm growing and the more autonomy that I gain, the less impact my family ideas and patterns might have on myself. And the more impact that the family does have, the more anxiety the individual will carry. And this is a tricky thing because when I first learned this, I thought, well, that doesn't make sense because we need others. But it's not talking about individualism or total independence. It's being able to know that I'm separate, therefore I can show up and be in relationship with you without getting dysregulated and thrown off by your emotions. So I'll explain that more as we go on. But this anxiety that I'm talking about, Bowen does explain more what he calls chronic anxiety. And it's not kind of maybe the acute anxiety that we think of. It's more a general baseline for people. And it's how it kind of takes up all this space in us that we don't maybe even realize until we're in a relationship, a new relationship, and then some things, our anxiety will be exposed. So the anxiety that we carry, whether it's extensive or minor, depending on our system that we've been in, it does show up and we carry it with us in those other relationships that we have. So how does this apply to our emotions? So the more differentiated a person is, the easier that they can separate one, their own feelings from their own thoughts, which is a lot of times when we are asked, how do you feel? Our answer starts with, well, it feels like da 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 da, which is a thought. Or I feel that da 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 da, which is a thought. So that just gives a clue right there, is that sometimes it's so, our emotions are so enmeshed and linked with our thoughts that we don't ever actually take the time or have the ability to separate those. And therefore, it's harder to make decisions because we're just feeling all of these emotions and we don't really know why. And then they can also more easily separate their feelings from their partner or another individual's feelings. So I'm gonna give you some more like concrete examples, like a difference between someone who might be more differentiated versus someone that's less differentiated. If you have any questions so far, just ask. Again, this is like a big topic and it's hard to kind of encompass it all in just one uh, session or one group. It's something that we continue to experience and work on throughout a long period of time. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, just ask, or there's lots of people out there that cover this topic. And it's just something that when I learned it, it really made a difference in my life. And I realized how much my family's emotions and feelings were affecting me. And I felt like they were part of me. And so a lot of times my coping mechanism would be to just not talk to that person. So that's kind of a real life example. It's like, if we're not differentiated, it's too dangerous or too risky to be in relation with certain people because their emotions and their feelings will take over you. Or you'll be so affected by them that it's hard to have a healthy relationship or interaction with some people. So when we can assemble our emotions, meaning separating out the thoughts and the feelings, we can make sense of the experience, which gives us more power to choose how we respond in our lives rather than becoming reactive. So that's why this is kind of really linked to some of the other work we do here at Kashad Counseling with processing emotions and understanding emotions, because they go hand in hand. There's a reason why it's important to understand your own emotional experience, and that will boost your growth, and your growth helps you become more differentiated. That really is kind of what differentiation is in my mind, is personal growth. So just kind of some traits that we can just at a glance look at, to help get an understanding of what this looks like. So, and remember, this is not it's something we're always working on. So if you look at this and think, oh, well, sometimes I do and sometimes I don't, or, it's never going to be 100% all the time. It's more just the concept and the something to be working towards, and to give you more awareness. So a highly differentiated person would be someone that is responsive rather than reactive. They set boundaries. This is a really important one, and this gives a lot of insight, I think. But when they set those boundaries, they don't feel guilty or selfish. So, and they also don't feel that resentment towards people they might have to put up boundaries with. So that's a lot. And something about boundaries that's important to realize, and I think a lot of us don't, is that boundaries are something that we set, and we take action. So we don't set a boundary and expect someone else to keep our boundary. It doesn't work like that. This is what I'm going to do to take care of myself, and I'm going to follow through with that boundary. People who are more differentiated don't avoid conflict. They're able to address differences. It's not such a threat to have conflict or differences of opinion. They're not as rigid. They're more flexible. They're honest about what's important to them. So they're able to kind of show up in relationships more authentically, because they're not so afraid of others' responses to them, because they have that strong sense of self. So therefore, their relationships do foster more mutual respect and growth, and they also are more fulfilling. So on the flip side of that, like a undifferentiated person would be more reactive to their situation. So if some conflict does come up or some trigger comes up, it's more reactive rather than making an intentional choice about how they respond. Others' happiness and well-being determines my happiness and well-being. So that's a very hard one too. Like, maybe you can notice that in yourself. I notice that in myself sometimes in my life, where others' opinions and satisfaction and happiness with something I do is almost what I'm focused on more than if I think it's good or if I'm happy with my performance or whatever like that. So if I'm very undifferentiated person, I avoid conflict. Conflict's too threatening. It's too overwhelming. So they might appease whoever they're with and just go with what the other person's saying to avoid conflict, or they might avoid that person altogether, or avoid situations altogether that might bring up some uncomfortable differences. And as a result, relationships often feel empty. There's a lot of resentment in these relationships because it's hard to engage. And you feel that your core and yourself feels that when you're not being yourself and showing up in what way you think is important. Um, these are just sorry, I'm gonna go. Well, I don't know if I, these are just some again general basic um, characteristics that you might see, and again they will fluctuate. You might notice this in your life more than when you're a good way to kind of understand this is like when a couple gets married, um, and there's no children in the family yet, and it's just the couple, and things are okay, and everything seems pretty smooth to a point, and then the first baby comes along, and there's a lot of change, and there's a lot of you remember when I talked about that anxiety that we carry with us. So some of that anxiety, maybe around our own unresolved attachment with our parents or our other siblings or something, that will start to show up when there's kind of this shift in the family system. And differentiated individuals are able to kind of be flexible and adapt to that big change. More undifferentiated individuals have a harder time doing that because of their their more rigid thinking and their unresolved issues from the past that maybe they've avoided up to this point. Um, yeah, so kind of those big shifts in the family system really kind of start exposing some of these patterns. Um, here's just some like things you can take with you because I think differentiation is such an amazing concept and it applies in so many different ways. But when we go to actually do something about it, it can be a little more tricky. It's more of a lived experience in our life. So these are kind of some things you can take with you to start being more aware. Um, and maybe there's different relationships or areas that you might be more aware of when you're um, a little more, um, your protections come up a little more, you're a little more rigid. Um, who you're around is an indicator. And I think Marie Bowen said it's like the true test of differentiation. I'm kind of butchering this quote, so it's not a direct quote, but it's along these lines of if the person kind of remains in that differentiated state around most people and in most situations, especially around our family. So it's the people that we're closest to that it's harder to be differentiated around because they're more important in our life. We depend more on them, and therefore their response to us is going to have more weight to it than a stranger or someone that we don't have a lot of stake in. So, um, and that's something that maybe I would talk more about in another further Max group later on because I do love that topic as well. So, just some places to get you started, like when, and we kind of talked about this earlier, but when someone asks you how you feel, are you answering with a thought? And this is so hard to do. This is really hard for me to do. It's hard to answer with a feeling. We tend to go more to our thoughts. So if someone says, and how did that make you feel? How did you feel when, you know, your mom didn't show up to your birthday party? You might say like, well, it made me feel like she she always forgets about me, you know. That's more of a thought. So just going through some of these in your head, maybe a recent experience you've had with someone you're close to in your life. So if you tend to answer, it feels like, or it feels that, I feel that, they do this or something like that. That's an area to start with because that's helping you separate your thoughts from your feelings. The more you can do that, the better you can be at communicating. And another way to communicate better is to try using more I statements, which I'm sure that's a common thing that we talk about in just relationships and communicating is these I statements. But this, lots of times when you hear the I statement, it might be like in conflict, like with a partner. If you use these I statements, it takes the accusation off of the partner. But also, the other use for this is if you tend to answer with we instead of I, that might be an area to look at. Like who are you grouping yourself together with? So if you're being asked a question about your child and you answer like, well, we feel that this is the right way. What about the I? Like, what if you separated yourself and your thinking and your thoughts and your feelings from your spouse or whatever the relationship might be? Is there need to be more of a separation there? Um, are there things that are important to you, but you hold back from or avoid because you're afraid of your family's reaction or people that are close to you? Like an example might be someone um, like in my family, there is a lot of farmers. And so sometimes I've had relatives that want to break away from that. But that's not what the family does. The family is farming family. And so they resist from exploring other options because they're really afraid of hurting their family or they're afraid of how their family might view them or things like that. Um, so are you neglecting parts of yourself because of fears about how someone might react to you? Um, but again, this is all, there's a balance because we don't want to just not care about anybody or what anybody thinks of us. Um, so again, it's this sweet spot, right? It's this being able to stay connected, but also have our autonomy. And where is that balance for you in your life? Um, so just take more time to notice another like areas where you're more susceptible to reactivity, meaning, that feeling when your heart starts pumping, or you might start sweating, or you might feel the urge to yell or run away. It's this feeling of I'm reacting to my situation. I'm not responding with intention. I'm reacting because that's what I'm used to, and this is my body just goes into that pattern. And I've done that in the past, and that's how I am. So those areas of my life where um, I do notice being a little more sensitive, that might be a word that helps illustrate what I'm talking about, or um, things that seem a little more stressful or you want to avoid because you're afraid of conflict. Those areas in your life, those will give you clues to where you might be able to work on some personal growth. And always we recommend, um, if you're really feeling this but not quite understanding where you can go, working with a therapist, understanding these areas, learning more about boundaries, um, what that looks like for you in your life is important, and it's shouldn't be compared to anybody else. So I hope that wasn't too much information trying to squeeze into this. If there's any questions or comments, now is a great time to do that. Um, if you are interested in like learning more about this, again, the Bowen Center online has his basic information, his different concepts. Um, a therapist who's really popular in Utah because of cultural and things um, that really focuses on differentiation is Jennifer Finlayson and Fife. Um, her work is really based in differentiation, and she helps couples in sex therapy. And then Dr. David Schnarch, he has several books that really talk about this in the couple relationship, and really expounds on this concept in a real way. And a lot of clients love his books. And we have some in our office if you're ever interested in that. Um, yeah, always reach out if you have more questions. And otherwise, we'll wrap it up for tonight.